I'm not a cradle Lutheran, as they say. My father was practicing Hindu. My mom, in the West Indies, there was a lot of colonial Christianity, so she had a lot of Presbyterian influence in her upbringing, but was non-practicing. So I never went to church. I knew of Christians from popular culture, right? So I knew that what I thought was that Jesus wanted you to behave well and not do bad things, and God help those who help themselves. All those cliches and platitudes and. Yeah, but my father was very much into religious dialogue, and so even as a Hindu, he worked at a Catholic church. He engaged dialogue with anybody that had a faith, So as a result, as kids, we were invited to all kinds of churches, and so when I had kids, I was really interested in the dialogue, the religious dialogue. Not necessarily Christian, but having this conversation with friends, and they had affiliation with a Christian church, and a friend invited me, and I went to this church, and it was a Lutheran church, and you kind of meet the pastor afterwards, and I recognized that I had met this pastor before. He was a chaplain at UVic, and back then, I had a very, very fascinating conversation with him where, my idea of Christianity, he challenged my idea of Christianity. So I was sort of like, okay, so God helps those that help themselves. When people are in trouble, it's because, God has abandoned them. And this Lutheran chaplain had said to me, no, God is more profoundly with us in our struggles, in our vulnerabilities, then God is with us in our strengths and our celebrations. And I thought that was a really strange thing for him to say. It was so counterculture that when I, realized that this was the same guy 10 years later, I was like, oh, this is that guy from UVic who told me this countercultural way of viewing Christianity that I'd never heard of before. So I engaged in religious dialogue with him, and within the year I was baptized. And then almost 20 years after that, I was ordained at the same church. Different pastor, but, it was the bishop, two bishops, the Anglican bishop and the Lutheran bishop. But it was quite a journey, but very unexpected. But the piece about the Lutheran lens is that God does meet us in our vulnerability and our in our weakness, not our strengths. And there is a human connection, a shared experience that we all encounter when we're really vulnerable and when we're in our deepest need. And to imagine that that's where we encounter the world, we encounter God together is, I think, a beautiful thing. And I think kind of the foundation for the Community Lunch Project.
Would you like some lunches? We've got turkey sandwiches or cheese sandwiches. Cheese? Cheese. Okay.
I'll go for the turkey.
Here's a cheese one for you.
Okay, thank you.
And you'll go for turkey.
Pastor Anita really embodied for us what we felt was important to our future ministry within this congregation. She's not a lifelong Christian. She always talks about the fact that she was born a Hindu, became a Christian, and chose to be a Lutheran. And that really spoke to me. And she really has embodied that, and we think that is important, that we look to people outside the walls that are not cradle-to-grave Lutherans. I mean, that's not where our future is.
One of the things that we decided when we called the pastor was that in order to have any growth, any hope of growth here, our pastor would have to be out in the community. And so we stipulated about 50% time in the community. We just really wanted to see that our pastor helped us make contact with people in the neighborhood because we weren't seeing that happen much. Even the people in our manor, we have a very low percentage of people who worship with us and whom we know.
I thought, they're very organized and they have they have an understanding, but they also have this space, this spaciousness where they don't know what's going to happen. And in that posture of spaciousness, there is a tremendous amount of faith, a tremendous amount of trust that God has something, in mind. And I thought, that's exciting. That made me feel like, wow, I wonder what it is that God has in mind.
And one of the people in the manor was Tom Burke, who took her around to see services that are in the community, needs and services. And this is where she met Lorelei Loughton at Mount Pleasant Community Center, who had taken on preparing lunches and serving them at the community center when all the programs were closed down. She realized people were needy, and that was a way.
The regular programs, because of COVID, had shut down, and she noticed that there were people outside the community center that were hungry. They were just congregating. There were a lot of vulnerable people, and so she said, you know what, just went and got my crock pot, went to the grocery and made a crock pot full of soup, got some cups and spoons and just gave it out. And she said there was like literally one crock pot full of soup. And that, over the time of pandemic, grew to about, I would say, she said 4 volunteers in a little tiny kitchen, 4 crock pots and instant pots that they got donated from Canadian Tire and Home Depot around here. They got some funding from the City of Vancouver. There were hundreds of people coming for soup.
And when things started to open up again and her job she got reinstituted into her original job, she was looking for groups who would help take on some of that lunch programming. And then we had a meeting with Lorelei, a bunch of us had a meeting with Lorelei, and we said, yeah, we think we can do this.
She thought it was about food security, and she noticed it was about community. People were really craving community. And I asked her, do you have a religious background? She's like, absolutely not. So I thought, okay, there we go. This is exactly what I would call a Eucharistic moment, right? But she has no affiliation with Christianity. She may or may not understand the story of Jesus, at the table, breaking bread and sharing wine. But here's God alive and well in the community in the middle of pandemic.
This lunch program was a new endeavor to just make ourselves known more. And I think that we were responding to Lorelei's request. We thought there were people in the neighborhood who really needed some help. And this one day a week wasn't going to be a lot, but if other groups did it one day a week, we sort of helped out.
So after we decided, sure, let's try something, let's try it. I know that the Synod team calls it experiments. The missional terminology is an experiment. So with a handful of volunteers, we started. And we started with 30 lunches. We gathered a small group of people. We actually had people go out into the community with a letter from Spirit of Life saying, this is what we're doing. Would you be willing to put up a poster about this? Would you be willing to give us donation? And we met a lot of community partners that way. They were very generous. We have a neighbor here who is being disrupted by the SkyTrain, and even still, she gave us lunch bags and sandwich bags. She ordered them and gave them to us.
And initially, I was quite skeptical that this could actually work because, I've been in business for most of my life, and I looked at this idea that was coming through, and I thought, boy, there's 2 things we need. We need the finances to do this, and we need the people to do this, and our congregation is awful small.
Mark, he wrote a letter and he went around to different neighbors. He was looking for 5 donors to support the ministry, and he was able to find 3 donors. in addition to the grant money that we got from the Synod to support the ministry. So we have a neighbor that lives right across the street that has no affiliation with the church whatsoever, is funding, like giving us a very generous donation for this project because they like to see good things happening in their own neighborhood.
Partnership with Spirit of Life and Pastor Anita started through the Mount Pleasant Food Network. This was a network of community partners in the Mount Pleasant area that tackle such subjects as food justice and food security in our area, in our community. And so Pastor Anita came to one of the meetings and we hit it off really well. And so I asked more about what they were doing at Spirit of Life. She told me about the sandwich program, and I thought, well, you know, we have a lot of donated bread and even meats and vegetables, etc. So it makes sense for us to help out with the preparation of these sandwiches. So we began, I think, back in February and made, I think, 80 sandwiches for the program, and we kind of called it the You Are Loved program because I believe that's what's written on the sandwich bags.
They are one of the bigger processing centers, so they can take big donations of recovered food. So this is food from grocery stores that are nearing expiration date, food from bakeries that are like end of the day, so they're still good. Just recovered food that would normally go in the garbage if otherwise. And there are a few organizations that help in Vancouver with recovered food.
Puts the sandwiches together? Well, we just have a superstar volunteer named Rita, and she comes in every Wednesday and like clockwork, and she's here for probably 3 to 4 hours putting these sandwiches together and putting the snacks together, putting these together. She used to have to cut and peel the carrots and cut the celery, and then we found out that our food wholesaler actually already cuts celery and carrots, so that worked out well.
For us, they will take things like bread and tuna and mayonnaise, things that you can't really give someone a big jar of mayonnaise and say, go with God, have this mayonnaise, but they can make 100 sandwiches for us so that we can distribute them here in this little pocket.
Yeah. The symbiosis that I see between Spirit of Life and other faith organizations and the neighborhood houses is to develop community. We're all in that together. And I think that it doesn't matter necessarily what religion's involved, what your philosophy, your spirituality is. At the end of the day, we see real need in the community, and we're much better working together than working separately. So we can build on each other's skills, build on each other's relationships, etc., to provide better supports in the community. So it's to me, it's a natural fit.
Still didn't know where we were going to get the people, and but as we went along, people just showed up out of the neighborhood. They saw the need. They saw us reaching out to them.
We have volunteers from the community now, so we've had people that have been coming by and picking up a lunch, and they sort of, why are you doing this? You guys do this every Thursday? Why? And that question of why has always been, we always say because we think that, post-COVID, people need to make connections. We would never, I say as the pastor of the church, I'd never really know who my neighbors were if it wasn't for a way, and this is a way.
Yeah, someone could ask you. That's good. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
We had people come in off the street. They saw our sign and they said, "Can I volunteer?" Sure. Do you live in the neighborhood? No. I just saw your sign. I was driving by.
70 sandwiches in total.
Right.
And then now I think we are at 90. packs in Florida. Wow. And so it's taking us longer. And then as Pastor Anita said earlier today, she's thinking of possibly putting it up and running.
Very good. This is positive.
I moved back into the City Hall area a few years ago, and I happened to be walking by the church one Thursday, and they were handing out the free lunches, and I started a conversation with Pastor Anita, and then I thought, well, I think this looks like a really, really good opportunity to sort of slip back into the community, and what Pastor Anita and the church was doing was really, really great, and so I thought I would just lend some time to that. I think I bring a sense of organization. We started off a year ago with 70 bagged lunches, and now we've gone up to 90 bagged lunches. And the pickup has been really, really popular during the summer months. And so I wouldn't be at all surprised if going into the fall, now that the word has gotten out, that we might have to increase the number of production of the bags of lunches as well. And so I like to think that my sense of organization helps them get everything done within the hour and so on.
I relocated to Vancouver during COVID. I essentially lost my entire community because of COVID regulations. And as soon as COVID restrictions relaxed a little, I made a point of connecting with Pastor Anita. I do have a very long and strong church background, which I have participated in and then pulled back from depending on where I am in my life. But it was something that I knew I could get involved in quite easily. And so when I heard the lunch program was happening, at the risk of sounding a little pathetic, it was a way to matter and a way to belong and to have some sort of social interaction and purpose with the community at large.
We just seem to be a feeling of community. That's very, very important to me since I was a child. One reason is to provide good nutritious food for neighborhood, for people who maybe don't have a means. And secondly is that social contact, which I think is most important. A lot of people come here, they don't need a food, but they come for chat. And if they don't see you, then they wonder what happened to you, are you all right? And if we don't see them, we worry about them. So some of them we actually ask the phone number if in case they need some, because they don't have anybody. So this particular lady, she's 93 years old, and we learn about them. They tell us their life story. She came here from Russia, she was an orphan. And how she lived in Quebec first, and she speaks 3 languages. She speaks French, German, Russian, and English, which is 4 languages actually. And she's just amazing. She's 93 years old, and she comes with her buggy. We give her sandwiches, and she also lives someplace where there's homeless people, so she takes extra for the homeless people, which I think is very special. And she's the one who brought us these sweaters. She knitted them herself. She used to wear them, but now she said she lost a lot of weight, so she brought us over if we couldn't wear that. Isn't that beautiful? So I told her I will share with Pastor Anita, so she will look at it and we're going to fight over it, of course.
I really didn't know what to think at first. I don't consider myself to be a do-gooder. I can be pretty critical of things. So I wasn't sure what to expect. The honest truth is that the church is really suffering, and so they're really trying to find ways to remain purposeful. And I believe the world has become very broken and very complex, particularly in our first world. And so I see people who are, some of the people that come for lunches are the disenfranchised, the aging, a couple, elderly, shuffling down the street very slowly. And I asked them if they wanted a lunch. And they stopped and they kind of took note of the lunch table. And the woman just had this look on her face like, you know, is this a miracle kind of a thing? And she almost burst into tears, and she said, you know, and her husband kept shuffling forward. And I said, well, he can have a lunch too. And she goes, you know, he just had chemo treatment. He's suffering from cancer. And she just took these 2 lunches and she said, this is the best thing because now we can go home and both rest. It was just a moment, you know.
Now we have volunteers from the community, from the neighborhood, from the congregation, and from the Lutheran Manor. So, and the volunteers have become their own community, which has been really nice. We have a volunteer that every week he goes and to the Uprising Bakery, and his name is Harold. He brings these incredible baked goods, and the only reason he does that is to encourage the volunteers that are here. So it's gotten to the point where it's 11 o'clock and it's like, where's Harold? I'm hungry. We got to put on the coffee. He has like all these treats, and it's pretty obvious that he's doing it as a treat for the volunteers. And they look forward to it. We were kind of like, okay, we have to get this done. We have to get the sandwiches out by 11:30. We weren't really stopping to sort of build community. And I was thinking there's got to be a way that we have to factor in some community building time. And then Harold just started showing up with baked goods, and that was it. He did it.
What do I think of it? I think it's a great idea.
How come?
Well, because it contacts people. Yes. Making them feel that they matter.
Can I just drop it in?
Do you think a lot of people feel that they don't matter or aren't seen?
You hear it all the time.
Actually, every day I lift Corona in my work.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. And today you get...
In the beginning, we thought this might be about food security. You know, we thought, well, we'll meet people who are vulnerable, who are transient, but that wasn't the case. We found out that that wasn't the case. It was less about food security and it was more about community connection. And, you know, we think about Jesus who was healing people, and we think about the healings, and we think, you know, these are physical healings or spiritual healings, right? Or, but Jesus was always healing people back into community, right? Restoring people back to community, because community is really important for all of us. It enables us to thrive. I mean, loneliness is a huge thing. I mean, if you have to isolate, social distance, isolate, and then you're also dealing with things like a diagnosis, a serious health diagnosis, or the mental stress of not talking to anyone, not touching anyone, not sharing your life with anyone. We were finding that people were craving connection, and not out of some frivolity, but basically out of survival, and how much that affects your mental health when you're unable to connect. I saw a woman who came by, and I hadn't seen her in a while, and I said, "Hey, it's really good to see you. I haven't seen you in a bit." And she said, "No, I haven't been outside in a bit." And I just wasn't thinking, and I said, "Oh, are you not well?" And she's like, No. All I could do was to get dressed and to come out today to see you guys." And it was then that I realized, I heard her, I saw her.